Good afternoon. Welcome back to the B&H event space. Today, you're tuned in to bird photography, capturing the moment. I'd like to welcome back one of the best to do it, Isaac Grant. Isaac, how's it going?
Great. How are you?
Doing wonderful. Good to have you on as usual. If you guys do not know Isaac, we've had a bunch of stuff that we've done with him that is on our YouTube channel. I suggest you check that out. And you guys are in for a really, really, really great hour. Some wonderful photography and experiential advice here. So, Isaac, I'm going to turn it over to you, and I will see you in a bit for some Q&A.
Okay, great. Thank you. All good?
Looks
All
good.
good.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right. So thank you for joining me, and thank you to B&H for having me back. As you mentioned, this is the fourth talk that I've done for B&H. You can check them out on the learning page of my website, which is isaacgrantphotography.com, or of course on B&H's YouTube channel. They're there as well. The first was on things like the importance of the background and the composition and the shooting angle. The second was on birds and flight photography. The third was on preparing to go out in the field, making a plan, scouting. This one is on capturing the moment. So each one is sort of refining stuff a bit more. Our agenda is going to be to learn a little bit about me, to go over some memorable components of a bird photo, and how to implement those best practices in the field. I'm not going to talk about things like identifying birds or specific camera brands or lenses. Doesn't matter what camera you use, doesn't matter what lens you use, doesn't matter what brand it is. These techniques and the things we're going to go over work for all of them. We're not going to talk about things like determining proper exposure or basic photographic principles like aperture or things like that. That's for another talk entirely. What we will talk about is creating memorable photos. We'll talk about the kind of field work that you need to get the best results. We'll talk about planning for shots that you want to get, and we'll talk about capturing the beauty of the birds and their surroundings. A little bit about me. I say this all the time. I'm married to my college sweetheart. Got two boys, Lathan and Ryan, getting old. One just graduated high school, and we have a nice husky mix named Luna, who's a sweetheart. I lead bird photography tours around the country. I lead a number of them now. You can check them out on my website. I've been birding my whole life since a little kid. My dad was a birder, was raised birding. So I know all their calls, their habits, their behaviors, their tendencies. And those are tools I use all the time. I conduct also online photography coaching, things like post-processing, fieldcraft, all that kind of stuff. Top slide here is I'm #1 all time for most birds seen in Staten Island, New York, where I live. I've actually seen one more species than that. Didn't update that slide. The bottom one, I am #5 all time for most birds seen in New York State. So that's a lifetime of experiences and a lifetime of being around the birds that I use out in the field all the time. I'm a Sony shooter. I use an A1 and an A9 III. My primary lens is 600 f4. I recently purchased a 300 2.8. And when I'm looking to get certain types of shots, what some you'll see here, I use a 70 to 200. So before we really get going into the meat of things, let's talk about birds. This is a bird photography talk. So I'm going to stress learn the birds, right? The more you know about the birds, their calls, their habits, where and when to photograph them, when the best time to photograph them. And of course, the better you'll be able to get bird photos, the better you'll be able to position yourself in the kind of place that will allow you to get the best background and the best opportunities. So learn the birds. There's nothing that beats spending time in the field, listening, watching, paying attention, and then figuring out how to apply that towards getting photos. And again, before we start, this is sort of the main point of this talk. Bird photography is an art. Photography is an art. And it's very difficult. Bird photography is super difficult. We all know, anyone who shoots birds knows that there's so many hurdles you have to get over. The weather, birds are skittish, they're small, they're fast. They don't want to pose for you. Dogs can bark, horns can honk, anything can happen. The wind can be blowing in the wrong direction. There's 1,000 things that can go wrong. And because it's so difficult, there's a tendency to treat bird photography more as a sport and not an art. Oh, I got a shot. Oh, look how sharp it is. That sort of thing. But I want to get past that. This talk is about getting past that. It's about capturing a certain moment and treating photography, no matter how difficult it is, as an art. One of the ways you can do that is by really paying attention to the non-bird elements of the photo. Very often the bird is a small percentage of the photo. A bird might be 20%, 10%, 30, 40% of a photo. So that means that other percentage, whether it's 90 or 80 or 70% of the photo, is not a bird. That's a lot of what we need to concentrate on. We not only have to capture a moment, we have to capture a moment surrounded by beauty. And one of the things that I always take out in the field with me, I think of it all the time, what I want to see this photo if there was no bird in it. It's very important. Birds are difficult to capture. Birds in beautiful surroundings, even more difficult to capture. And if the photo is engaging enough, if there's enough other beauty or light or scenery or whatever is in there to make it really captivating, to really capture the certain moment, sometimes it doesn't even matter if there's a bird in there or not. It's still a beautiful photo. So I want to go over 4 elements of to make memorable bird photos. One would be peak action. One would be natural beauty. One would be actions, interactions, predator-prey moments. And the last is magical light. So the first one's peak action. This will be the only technical part I talk about in the whole talk. Really, one other minor piece. If you're shooting action, you want to keep the camera continuous autofocus. You want it to continue to autofocus while the action is happening, right? You want to shoot with the fastest possible shutter speed so that you can capture the action. Of course, you want to shoot with the fastest card. You don't want to have some sort of great moment in front of you and your camera buffers because you've got too slow of a card, right? That's not what you want. It's hard enough to get in front of really fantastic moments. The last thing you want to do is miss it because your card is buffering. And it really helps to plan your shots. Go out in the field with a shot in mind. I'm looking to get a falcon flying by me at a certain angle, or I want to get a swallow doing whatever it's doing, or I want to capture something else, whatever that is you want to capture. Figure it out beforehand, work at it in the field to get that shot, and then wait for the moment to happen. Make sure you don't miss it. But when you're anticipating that moment, when you've pre-planned that moment, it helps a lot. So we're going to start getting into some photos. And I just want to mention 2 things. The first one would be, I'm not going to go over too many technical points in each of the 4 elements. I want the photos to do the talking, and I'll explain it more in the photos. And the second is that you're going to see a common theme in these photos, which is sharp focus on a bird, nice light, beautiful complementary background, beautiful surroundings. So here's a redhead capturing peak action. Redhead was displaying for females. This photo was taken in New Mexico. The peak action moment is when these birds display, they throw their head all the way back and they call, and that's the display, and that's how they attract females. So you need to be able to have enough shutter speed in this case, as I mentioned, to get the peak action shot right when the head is all the way back, when the mouth is open. And again, it's surrounded by beautiful light, beautiful colors, beautiful background. Peak action in this case is the moment that the head is all the way back and mouth open and it's calling and displaying. Here's a red-winged blackbird flying right in my face. What's the peak action? I wanted a shot of these birds flying right at me. I walk my dog in the park underneath the Verrazano Bridge, and I know every time it rains, there's a big puddle that forms, and all the local breeding birds go into that puddle and drink. And so I got myself in front of that puddle, late evening light one evening, so I could photograph these red-winged blackbirds that were coming and drinking and then flying back towards their nest. So the peak action in this place would be a bird flying right in my face, wings up, where you can see the beautiful red wings. And that's the kind of moment that I planned for. I went in the field with that in mind. I worked in the field to get the right background and the right everything else, and of course have enough shutter speed to capture peak action. This is a white morph reddish egret photographed in Florida. I was running a tour down there, and 3 times we saw this bird, and 3 times it flew away before we could get anywhere close to it. On the last evening, in this location, we finally got in front of this bird in some beautiful evening light. Now, if you've seen reddish egrets feed, there are all sorts of crazy motions and actions and things like that. And with peak action would be, I wanted to get it floating in the air, wings all the way out, angled towards us, beautiful background, sort of showing a bit of the story of how reddish egrets feed and what they do. Here is a monk parakeet, photographed also in Florida. Watch these birds landing up on a tree, flying down to pick up nesting material, and then flying back to their nests. So I wanted to capture a photo of these birds, topside view, coming down, beautiful background, wings all the way out, peak action, sharp, full extension, going in to land. Now, the Florida photo is a snail kite. My two favorite wing positions for flight photos, what I consider peak action for these types of photos, is either taking off and that wings all the way forward, that sort of powerful wings forward position, and the other would be a backside banking shot or a top shot like of that monk parakeet. So in this case, peak action is bird was taking off right at sunset. We're out on a airboat photographing these birds. Wanted to capture it just as it took off, that perfect wing position against beautiful background, beautiful surroundings. Here's a cliff swallow photographed in Utah. Cliff swallows are super fast. What I wanted to do was be able to capture these birds banking like this. I found a location where they're flying by you and then going by and going up to under a bridge to where they nest. And so peak action is this other, but my favorite pose, like I said, that banking pose. Get these birds coming by you, get them banking, get them turning up. And again, getting them in the right light with the right background is the key towards capturing the moment. It's not just any moment, it's a beautiful moment in a beautiful photo. This one's a little tough to see, but this is a yellow-rumped warbler flying towards us, fly catching. There's actually a little bug going right inside the right side of its mouth. If you pause this later on, you can see it. So the peak action here is this tiny little warbler flying straight towards me, catching a bug. Nice light, nice colorful background. It's a Florida scrub jay, photographed in Florida, of course. Again, peak action for me is getting them in flight with that powerful wings forward position. Here's a tree swallow, photographed locally in New Jersey. When I'm photographing these swallows, I'm looking for two things. Either that backside banking pose or a frontside banking pose. In this case, I was able to capture them backside pose, which is my favorite pose. Wings all the way forward, spread out, tail spread, bird looking at me, mouth open, calling, again, in beautiful light, in beautiful surroundings. There's a cardinal, peak action, that wings forward position. It's hard to photograph cardinals in flight, but if you're able to track them well enough, which is a good talk for the Birds in Flight talk, giving tips how to do that. But once you can do that and you can track them, then you can worry about not just getting a photo, but getting the photo. Peak action, wings forward, looking at me against a beautiful background. Here's a burrowing owl photographed in Florida. I could anticipate what's going to happen because this bird was perched up on a pole and the parent was behind me. And so the parent had food, the owl would fly towards the parent. So all you had to do was sit and wait and be ready for the bird to fly towards the parent. Sometimes the parent flew towards the young one, sometimes the young one flew towards the parent. So I was sitting and waiting and ready while this bird took off. Had the whole group that was with me getting shots like this, that these owls are taking off. And again, that's the kind of pose I want, that sort of direct stare, showing how intent it is on getting food, showing how focused it is on its parent. Second element would be natural beauty. So natural beauty, what I want you to concentrate on capturing the moment for natural beauty would be focus on many of the non-bird elements of the photo. What I talked about before would be those other 70%, 80% of the photo, right? Incorporate the beauty of the seasons into the photo. If it's flowers in the spring or snow in the winter or whatever it is. Natural beauty. Be sure to include habitat in some of your photos, right? It doesn't have to be every photo, of course, but when you have some sort of really beautiful habitat, show it. And showcase colorful birds. Those are very often memorable, right? I mean, cardinal photos, blue jay photos, Steller's jay photos, roseate spoonbill photos, these sorts of things, though that they may be common birds. When you have a beautiful moment captured with these striking birds, it just makes it even that much more of a memorable and powerful photo. So here's a rock run photographed in Utah. Again, this is one of those photos that I'm showcasing the environment, right? Rock wrens spend almost their entire life sitting on rocks or on the ground. They do go on to sagebrush or rabbit brush sometimes, depending on where they are. Excuse me, they're not the kind of bird that really spends a lot of times in beautiful settings like flowers or things like that. But I wanted to show where these birds live. I wanted to show the moment to me is a rock wren on a beautiful rock with the amazing snow-capped mountains in the background. And that's the moment. This is how they live. This is this tiny bird that lives in this vast surrounding. They sing from these rocks. They display for females from these rocks, and they spend their whole lives there. This is a black-bellied plover photographed in Florida. Shorebirds don't really spend time in a lot of really beautiful places. They're not in, flowers usually, unless they're on tundra breeding grounds, of course. They're not in necessarily the most pretty places. So when you capture the moment with these birds in the right light, with the right background, it not only brings out the natural beauty of the birds, but it brings out the beauty of the photo. In this case, a tiered, colorful background, very close to sunset. Really brings out the warm tones in the mud flat and sandy area that it was on, in the water, and of course in the dunes in the background. Beautiful bird, cinnamon teal. Sometimes the photo doesn't need anything more than a striking bird in striking light in gorgeous surroundings. It's looking at me. It's walking. There's little water splashing. This is a full frame photo, and this bird is photographed in Utah during a tour. With such a striking bird like this, you just got to get sometimes a nice close-up of a bird doing what it does, staring at you, focused on you. That's the moment I want to capture. Here's a hairy woodpecker, photographed while it's giving a tour in the Adirondacks in New York. To me, I'm always out for a different type of photo. There's a lot of woodpecker photos with a woodpecker on the side of a tree. Nothing wrong with that. That's what woodpeckers do. If I can get a woodpecker photo on something other than the side of a tree, I'm super happy. If I can get a woodpecker photo on something beautiful, in this case on a spruce tree with snow and cones and those beautiful snowy surroundings in the background, that's the moment. It's a moment of interest because the bird's not on something you see photos on so much. It's a moment of interest because it's in a beautiful location with a beautiful background. Went to photograph great gray owls in Idaho. There was 3 fledglings and 2 parents. This is dad. The photo I wanted the most on my time there was what I call the tree has eyes photo. Great gray owls have a way of just disappearing into the forest. If you didn't know that bird was perched there, in this case, if I didn't see it fly there, you would easily overlook it, especially if it wasn't looking at you. If it was looking away and you couldn't get those piercing eyes in your face, they just vanish into the forest. So the moment is that direct eye contact. And also really showing kind of how they make their living, right? That camouflage that they have, that amazing natural camouflage, where they can just disappear into the forest. In this case, I was very close to this bird and I saw it fly in, landed right in front of me. If you were 100 feet back and not paying attention to that spot, you'd never see it. This is a great crowned rosy finch photographed in Utah. We had about 3 feet of snow this year and we were there up in the mountains. And the rosy finches came down a little lower than normal. And to me, this is the moment of not only a rosy finch on a very complimentary perch with a nice snowy background, spruce trees or half covered in snow, but also it's tough because you never see rosy finches on this kind of perch. Rosy finches nest at 13,000, 14,000 feet up in the mountains. They spend their winter up in the mountains. They don't come low that often unless there's extreme weather. So you don't even have any opportunities to get them on this kind of perch. So for me, the moment is a rosy finch on a beautiful perch in beautiful surroundings. Here's I've shown this photo in some other talks, a yellow-throated vireo in flowers, capturing the beauty of the seasons. The moment is this gorgeous yellow-throated warbler in a perch of beautiful flowers, surrounded by beautiful flowers. I showed this photo in other talks, like I said, where I waited 6 hours to get this photo of this bird in this spot. And the moment is just capturing natural beauty. Small warbler in gorgeous surroundings. There's an orchard oriole photographed, and again, flowers. Early spring photo, flowers blooming, orchard oriole down low, eating in the flowers. Very often these songbirds will be picking bugs and things like that inside the flowers. So if you find a good flowering tree, you have a good chance of getting a photo like this. It's got to be the right location. That's from the other talk where you have to scout locations and figure things out. But once you've done that, then you want to capture a moment, a beautiful moment, whether or not there's a bird there, the color and the flowers are pleasing to the eye and something that I'd still want to see. Indigo bunting. Again, about capturing the moment. The moment is this gorgeous blue bird, photo taken right at sunset. Gorgeous blue bird, surrounded by beautiful greenery, surrounded by a beautiful background, surrounded by these berries with all these different cranberries and purples and blues. The moment sometimes is just the natural beauty as much as it is the bird. And when you can combine the bird and the natural beauty, that really elevates the photo. It really makes it memorable. It really makes it interesting. It really makes it something that people want to look at. And don't have to go and talk too much about natural beauty. In this case, any bird in this location, any bird sitting on azaleas would be gorgeous. The flowers, the colors, in this case, the natural framing. The moment is something sitting there completely surrounded by gorgeous azalea flowers with gorgeous azalea flowers in the background. So we're showcasing the season, we're showcasing the bird. We'll go to element number 3 now, which is actions, interactions, predator-prey type moments. When you have multiple birds, and this is the other piece of technical information I wanted to talk about, got to pay attention to your depth of field. If you want to get more than one bird in focus, you got to make sure you've stopped down enough to get them pretty much in focus. 2 birds together, mother and baby kind of things. If you want them both in focus, you got to pay special attention to your depth of field. Pay special attention to intimate moments, which is actually leading a workshop here on Long Island where we were able to capture a baby leash turned, not just walking or going towards the mother or getting fed, but it's actually leaning on the mother and sort of hugging her. It's got its little teeny tiny wings. That photo is not in this talk, hugging her. It's a really special moment. It's an intimate moment. It's a tender moment. Those are really the moments, right, that you remember because you can connect with them. Everyone had a mother. Everyone understands tenderness, and those kind of things that you can get in photos where you really make some sort of a personal connection to them matter. Always be on the lookout for stuff, fights, birds chasing each other, those sort of things can really be fantastic photos if you're able to capture them. And learning behavior, anticipating that behavior, figuring out what's going to happen based on the past will give you a better chance of capturing that photo in the future, right? So here's a black-bellied plover, the winter plumage, photographed in Florida during the tour. I told everyone, hey, you want to get shots of black-bellied plovers pulling these worms? They pull these giant worms. They're like 3 feet long when they get stretched out. And so everyone said, yeah, that sounds awesome. So, all right, let's go. I know the spot. And this is a black-bellied plover capturing the moment. The moment is where it was pulling the worm all the way out, and we have a whole string of them where it pulled it out. And in this case, it turned away from us, so I didn't pick those other photos. I picked the one where it's showing a sort of head angle towards us, nice stretched worm. Here's a real tender moment, intimate moment, right? Mom and baby, common loons, photographed right at sunset. It's hard to beat the little baby common loons sitting on mom's back with their little tiny wings and their adorable faces. Both of them looking at us. The moment is just the tender moment of a little baby riding on mom's back, right? Forgetting the light, forgetting everything else. It's just about this moment. And when you can surround them in that warm colors and in those beautiful colors and in that late evening light, it makes the moment even more special. Here's two Canada jays. I photographed those in a workshop up in the Adirondacks. Sometimes two birds are better than one, right? The bogs are filled with these kind of gorgeous perches. And sometimes you get lucky and two birds land together. In this case, I stayed far enough back, or even at f2.8, they're both razor sharp. And they're both looking at me. And they're both surrounded by this beautiful mossy perch and a beautiful background. So the moment is multiple birds staring at you. Speaking of multiple birds staring at you, here's two royal terns. Royal terns perform a really cool mating ritual. These were photographed in Florida, also during that workshop. These were photographed actually right after that reddish egret that I showed, the white face. Bird on the right, which is a male, came in with a fish. You try to impress the females. Look what I have. I caught this fish. Now let's mate. That's the philosophy. And so the female comes along and they get this pose and they all get erect and then they start dancing. And when they dance, they sort of follow each other and they go back and forth. And although that's a nice photo, and we have many photos of it, I don't like them as much because it doesn't show, there's no separation, there's no direct eye contact, because at that point they're just dancing around. So to me, the moment is male presenting fish, female coming in. I like this. Let's dance. Here's a moment between a bird and a bee, right? The birds and the bees. In this case, this was taken in Arizona. Late fall, very few flowers. There was a feeder nearby, and the feeder was basically out of nectar. And there was only one feeder left that had a little bit in it, and everything was competing. And I said to myself, you know what? It'd be super cool if I can get one of these birds and one of these bees. And so I just stopped concentrating on anything else and got a good old West face-off. So the moment is this interaction with a bird and a bee directly next to each other, both of them, in this case, right above a feeder. And that's the moment. Two birds. It's always better than one. Not always, but in a lot of cases, in this case, cactus wrens. Photographed in New Mexico. There's lots of cactus wrens on the site that I visit, and they're very tame. They sit on these beautiful cactuses. And so when I saw these two birds sitting together, I quickly positioned myself so I can get a cactus with what's the start of some little flowers coming out. Both of them, in this case, looking over towards the right, which is where their nest was. The moment is the two birds, similar poses, both on a cactus, the beautiful background. During a workshop, we saw these little baby American oyster catchers. We basically saw them be born, waited a few hours until they started moving, and then they started this crazy fight. You think, oh, look, a cute little American oyster catcher. It was fierce. I didn't actually think one of them was going to live. The one on the left, I wasn't sure it was going to live. The bird on the right just kept going after it and taking it and throwing it by its head. And so in this case, the moment is this, not only these adorable little American oyster catchers, but this big fierce one, mouth open, going after the little one who's falling back. Super cool nature moment. Is an American kestrel, predator prey. American kestrel in flight and that kind of light against that kind of background is nice. American kestrel in that kind of light and that kind of background with a decapitated mouse in its talons, it's even better, right? This kestrel would store its food right at the edge of a field and come in the evening and pick it up and eat it. It was sitting on a sign. I've talked about a photo, one of the similar photo like this in different talks, and then it flew off. So I was ready to capture the moment. Kestrel with prey. Ready for fights. We're photographing snail kites in Florida on a tour. And all of a sudden, these two white ibises did not like each other, got into this crazy territorial fight. I probably have about 300-400 photos of this fight. They were biting each other's face and they were doing all sorts of crazy things. And most of them, there's just this big jumbled mess of wings and beaks and faces, and there's not a lot of clear separation. I picked this photo because the bird on top was literally landing on the bird below and about to chomp on its face. It was intense, and it was a super cool moment to capture. In this case, there's two birds together, common terns, right? The bird on the left is flying towards the bird on the right. This was taken backlit right at sunrise. So you have gorgeous light. You have the interaction between the two birds, the bird on the left, give me that fish, the bird on the right, you're not getting my fish. And the chase went on. And this is a sort of perfect segue into the last element, which would be magical light. So how do you get photos with magical light? Well, you got to pay attention to the forecast, right? You got to be out in the field when you're going to have that kind of magical light. If you want to get a golden sunrise or a golden sunset, well, you need to know when that's going to happen and get into the right spot at the right time to get that shot. You got to shoot in conditions that allow it, right? If if you can't be overcast and you're expecting magical light, it's just not going to happen. Of course, it may sound basic, but it's not. You have to, if these are the types of shots you want, you have to be out in the field in that kind of light. So plan to be out in the field well before sunrise. So you got to find your bird, you got to get in position. So when the magic happens, you're there and ready, right? Or well after sunset. You want to be out long before the light gets there, and you want to be out well after sunset, because a lot of times the light happens well after the sun is set, and you get these beautiful backgrounds. So here's an eared grebe photographed in Utah, sunset over the Great Salt Lake. Relatively easy photo out there that I bring people to during a tour, but it's very simple. You wait for an eared grebe to swim towards that light, take a picture. This photo is about the bird flapping its wings, and it's about the gorgeous orange light and the colors. The moment is not just an eared grebe on the water, but in this case, it came up and it's doing one of those wing flaps like they do. Here's another great gray owl. This is also Dad, same one as the bird has the tree has eyes photo. This is Dad in a different spot. This is Dad backlit. After he left that tree, he flew towards this tree and landed there. It was right near sunset, and there was this gorgeous bokeh coming through the back. And so it allowed us to get these not only photos, a great gray owl staring you down, but a great gray owl staring right at you with this magical light in the background. The moment is the light, the eye contact, the bird on a beautiful perch. Here's a black-eyed plover photographed in Florida. This photo with the sun at my back, to me, would not be memorable at all. And it's nice. It's a plover pulling a little worm out of the ground. It's not one of those big giant worms. And the surroundings where it was not all that pretty. It was just sort of a muddy area. But at sunset, that muddy area just turns into beautiful pink hues and gold and pink, and it hides the not very pretty surroundings, right? So the moment is the bird, the stark black and white bird surrounded by color. It's doing something. It's pulling a worm surrounded by beauty. Another shot from Utah, from the Salt Lake. American avocet. When you have the right conditions out there, magic happens. It's gorgeous. In this case, this bird was lined up where it just had a completely vanishing horizon line. This gorgeous avocet in full breeding plumage, surrounded by the pre-dawn pinks and blues and golds of the sun about to rise over the mountains. That's the magic. The magic is the light. The magic is the color. Otherwise, this is just a photo of an avocet far away. If this was a gray overcast day or something like that, it wouldn't be a photo I would care about in any way. Here's a common tern. Another example of the light is what makes the photo. Yes, it's nice to have a common tern with its wings up, with two little baby common terns with their mouth open, mama feed me. It's much nicer when you have this photo in this kind of light. Sunrise, bokeh balls in the background coming through all the dune grass, the light coming through the wings, the light reflecting off of the grasses behind the birds. It just produces a beautiful scene. The moment is not just an interaction and a tender moment between two babies and mom, but it's the light. Speaking of light, here's more light. from Utah, American avocet. Again, there's lots and lots and lots of avocets out there. There's lots of opportunity to photograph birds like this. When you have these opportunities and you have this kind of light with these crazy bokeh balls in the background, it just accentuates the beauty a great deal. I actually have loads of photos of avocets from out there, the Salt Lake and other places that I haven't even processed, because the photos like this are just so much more compelling to me. The moment is the bird feeding its sunset, surrounded by golden light and golden bokeh balls. Sometimes the moment is very simple. In this case, it's a sagebrush sparrow. It's a sagebrush sparrow surrounded by the beautiful sage habitat. I go to this road out in Utah that's just miles upon miles upon miles of sage, surrounded by snow-capped mountains in the background. This is one of those photos I use a 70-200 for. It's a photo that I want to showcase the beauty of the surroundings. I position this bird right in that last little bit of color coming through one of those little valleys in the mountains behind. And I wanted to showcase the dramatic sunset and the beautiful sagebrush surroundings, right? So the moment is this bird surrounded by a dramatic sunset in gorgeous sage habitat. Sometimes the moment's easy, right? This is a snow goose. It's possible this is a hybrid snow goose Ross's goose. That's a different story. Anyway, bright white bird, New Mexico, gets these gorgeous sunsets. And the mountains in the background, which is what you're seeing here, a snow-capped mountain, they turn this amazing purple. And so the goal was to capture one of these snow geese flying against this mountain in this color. The same photo 30 minutes earlier, the background looks very different. It's not the same. What makes this photo is the magical light, those soft pastel purples, and the white of the bird that really pops out in front of it. Here's a great blue heron photographed after sunset in Florida. We were walking back in a tour and I was looking for something that we could photograph against this light. And so we found this great blue heron, and it's in a perfect spot. And the wind was blowing from behind it and it was pushing its plumes forward and it was pushing the grass to the right. And we're able to lay down and just capture this great blue heron in a fairly boring pose, right? But the photo was not boring because of the light. The moment is that heron standing against that beautiful pink and goldish background, surrounded by these beautiful surroundings. So I have two more photos I want to go over. This is a burrowing owl photographed in Florida during a tour. This is a photo I really wanted to get everyone on the tour to have, and thankfully we did. It's a lot of photos that come out of Florida burrowing owls. There's very few that come out like this. It takes planning, takes knowledge of the surroundings, takes a way to figure out exactly how to get this bird against that kind of background. And that's what I'm always after. How do you create a magical photo with the light? How do you capture the moment of this magical light? And in this case, a bird just staring right at us, which is lucky because the burrowing owls hardly care about you. They barely even look at you down there. And so it all lined up. Bird, a nice perch, fantastic bokeh balls in the background, staring at us. That's the moment. And the last photo I want to go over is sandhill cranes, a photograph from New Mexico at sunset. The moment here is just the serenity of a sunset with cranes. If you've ever gone out there, when I bring tour groups out there, one of the most magical times of day is well after that sun is set. And the cranes all come into roost in the water, and you're surrounded by the calls of all these cranes. And in this case, these four came together, and I was able to get low and shoot them with a really soft background and some light coming through. And that's the moment. The moment is the calm of the end of the day, the color, the light, the surroundings. So some final thoughts. You got to get beyond the basics, right? You know, we've got to get beyond, there's a bird and it's in focus and it's sharp. How we create memorable photos is by all the other stuff that I've gone over in my other talks, the background, the composition, the color, the light, the wing position, the interactions between birds. Those are all things that get beyond a bird or a bird on a stick to capturing a beautiful moment. And it really helps to go into the field with that shot in mind. What do you want to get? Do you want to get a sandhill crane at sunset surrounded by gold? Well, you got to make sure you're out in that spot. You got to know where the cranes are. You have to know where they roost. You have to go on a day when you get that kind of light. And then you have to work in the field and hope they land in front of you and hope everything else lines up where you can get a shot like that. But if you don't have it in mind, it's much more difficult to luck into a situation like that. It's much more difficult than, oh, I just happened to be out today and we had this magical sunset and, oh, look, those birds landed in front of me. Sure, it could happen every now and then, but that's not a path to success. That's not how you get better. That's not how you continue to grow your photography. Luck is not a way to success. It's work that is. So when you go into field with something like that in mind, it makes a big difference. And I didn't talk about this part of photography, but with every iteration of new technology, it just becomes easier and easier and easier to get a photo. The A9 III is just faster than the A1 is. This new R5 that's coming out is faster than the last R5, right? The new Z8 or Z9 is faster than the Z7 II before it. It doesn't matter what you shoot. As cameras can capture more frames per second and have better autofocus and more consistent autofocus, and you can see the exposure in the camera, simply capturing a photo is becoming easier and easier and easier. But if we want to create really impactful photos, we have to go beyond that. We have to worry about the background and the light and the moments and the interactions and all of those things. And that's because every photo has a story to tell, right? That story we want to tell, whether it's the small bird in the large surroundings, or the intensity of a fight, or the beauty of a sunset, or the beauty of flowers and birds that feed in them, or whatever it happens to be. That's what we have to portray with our art. And that's how we have to go and get past just taking a photo to capturing a moment with the right surroundings to really tell a better story. So thank you. I think I'm right on time. This is my phone number. Take it down. I am available for coaching. I run tours. Please visit my website, isaacgrandphotography.com. If you want to have any questions, you can just fill out the contact form, send it over. You can call me, text me. It's pretty simple. Please follow me at Isaac A. Grant on Instagram. And that's it. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Isaac. And we did drop the links to Isaac's last 3 videos with us in the YouTube section there. So we'll open it up for some Q&A. The first question I have from Dan joining us on YouTube: how many stops of compensation do you recommend? For example, the gray owl.
I don't use exposure compensation. I shoot 100% manual. So I'm not sure which owl he was referring to, but if it was the backlit great gray owl, then on a situation like that, you have to sort of go in between. You have to underexpose the background a little bit to get a little more exposure on the bird. And when you're processing the photo, you've got to tone down the background a little bit and then lift the bird a little bit. So I don't ever use exposure compensation. I shoot full manual and make sure that in a situation like that, that I'm sort of shooting in between, knowing that I'm going to underexpose that bird a little and that I'm going to overexpose the background a little bit and then even it out in post.
Okay. We had another exposure question from Noel. Several photos, the burrowing owl, for example, appear backlit, but the subject appears to be in light coming from behind the camera. Is this post-processing, or were they in a spot of light?
No, it's 100% backlit. It's exactly what I just described. I overexposed that bird a little bit, knowing I'd overexpose the background a little bit, so I could have pretty good exposure on the bird and then tone down the background. My camera, the Sony A1 that was taken with an A1, is fantastic. It's got excellent dynamic range, so you can play with that very simply. You can bring down a shot 1 stop, no problem, or even up 1 stop, no problem. And so a shot like that, what I want to do is not just show a complete silhouette against that background. In that case, I would just underexpose the shot. I prefer silhouettes kind of how I see them in real life. You don't normally see things just black. You can make out some color and some details on the birds. In this case, the owls are very close to us. That shot is essentially full frame, just cropped to square. And so I could see it pretty well looking at it, right? So I wanted to expose it that way. And again, bring the background down a little bit, bring the bird up a little bit, which is how I saw it with my eye.
I mean, I'm guessing it's just a lot of situational stuff where depending on the color of the bird, where the light is coming from, what the background is like, that
Yeah.
dynamic range is a huge help in
Yes,
allowing that latitude.
absolutely. It's moment by moment. I mean, and that's one thing that, I'm leading tours and stuff and telling people nonstop, hey, light just changed. We have to do something. Or when you're doing this, make sure you expose it. Or in that case with the owl, I said to everyone, listen, do it both ways and see which one you like more in post. Underexpose a little bit so you can just have a silhouette against a better exposed background, or overexpose the bird a little bit, which will overexpose the background a little. Not really overexposing the bird, it's bringing out more of the bird, which will then overexpose the background, which you can then play with in post and see what you like more. In that case, it's just a matter of very quickly stopping down or whatever you want to do just to change the exposure within moments.
Now, Isaac, is there anything you do or anything that people can do? It's one thing if you're going out and you're taking photos of a static object, a building, architecture, something like that. It's not moving. You can play to where the light is and set up your best angle. With the bird images, is it, are you approaching from, any particular angle, or is it kind of just you got to find the bird and then pivot from there? Or is there any like pre-planning or trying to set up a shot in advance, or is it really a little too unpredictable?
It's all of the above, right? It depends on the species, it depends on the location. That's actually a lot of what I talked about in the last talk with you guys was I think the talk was titled pre-shot preparation. Something about from knowledge to art, something like that. It was exactly that. It was about finding locations that can get you the shots you want, finding locations that have the birds that you want in them, finding locations that will get you the kind of background and the kind of light, and the kind of shooting angles that you're after. And that's the tough part. I will say this all the time. I'll say this on blue in the face. Getting a photo is the easy part, right? Getting a memorable photo, getting interaction, capturing specific moments is the hard part. And a lot of that it's not a skill like hitting a golf ball straight or, lifting a whole bunch of weights where you've got to train and exercise. It's more a skill in how hard you work and how much time you spent finding the right location and how much knowledge you have about those birds, about how close you can get, or when is the best time of year to photograph them. Uh, that's really the skill, and to me in bird photography is knowing all that stuff and then knowing how to combine it with your artistic expression and how to get it to work. It's not easy, and every bird is different, and every bird changes. Many of them change throughout the year and the location. I showed black-bellied plovers, for instance, two of them, one pulling a worm and one backlit at sunset. Photos taken in Florida. I'll tell you for a fact, I've never been close to one in New York. I've lived here my whole life. Juvenile black-bellied plovers, I've gotten close to a few of them. Adult black-bellied plovers in full breeding plumage, when they come here, are skittish little birds. They don't let you anywhere close. You see them out on the beach, you take one step towards them, when they're 100 feet away, they fly away. Their behavior changes dramatically. So the answer to that question is it's a very difficult actual question to answer because it changes by bird, it changes by location, it changes by time of year. Some birds, like I showed a photo of a yellow-throated warbler and these beautiful pink flowers. I went to that location literally the day that I wanted to get that photo, knowing that they first arrived on the breeding grounds. Because when those birds start breeding, they stay 40 feet up in the tops of pine trees. You can't get close to them. It's not even possible to get a shot like that. But early in their season, when they're there to set up territories, and when there's certain trees that are blooming, then all the bugs are at those flowering trees. Once those trees bloom, there's no other trees in the pine forest that bloom like that. So I knew that bird was going to come down to that flowering tree because it was the mass of all the insects around were at the flowering tree. So that was a day by day. As soon as those blooms are gone, impossible to get that photo kind of thing. So it changes a lot.
We'll kind of roll that sentiment into the next question. What you said, it's very hard. It's difficult. It's not easy. It takes a lot of work, a lot of practice, a
Yep.
lot of foresight and preparation.
Yes.
John's Movie Bar is asking, if is it a matter? Does the gear help? I mean, obviously, we know the gear. It makes it a heck of a lot easier now, but there were great bird photos way before there was great autofocus and way before there was digital and way before all the technology we have now. Can you maybe
Yeah.
give a tip for somebody who is working with older gear, especially for those challenging shots?
Mhm.
John says could never get the red-shouldered blackbird shot like you did with what he has now.
Red-winged blackbird. Yeah. So the obvious answer is yes, the gear matters, right? It would be crazy to say it doesn't. Smaller, faster, lighter, more accurate autofocus, seeing exposure in the camera. So if you have a mirrorless camera, it matters a great deal, right? You don't have to look at a photo and then look at the back of the camera and hope you don't need reading glasses to see what it actually looks like, right? You can see it on the spot. Capturing a bird at 20 or 30 frames a second, or if you've got an A9 III, 120 frames a second, which is absurd, right? Of course matters. If you want to get that pose, that shot, you know, where you can get it doing this, and all these things, of course it matters. The gear matters a great deal. I think the gear can also make us lazy, which is why I try to emphasize how it's the field work that makes the difference, right? Because it's gotten so much easier to capture a photo. To me, the point isn't actually capturing a photo. It's capturing something beautiful, right? It's capturing something memorable. It's capturing a moment, an interaction, some sort of magical light, or just gorgeous surroundings or something like that. So yes, if you're fortunate enough to have the latest and greatest or better gear, it absolutely matters. It makes getting photos easier. It gives you a higher percentage of keepers. It gives you a higher percentage of keepers in difficult situations, like a red-winged blackbird flying in your face, or if you've got a camera with really good dynamic range. Listen, I don't shoot Canon, but I know a guy that shoots with an R3. He can, you know, go to 25,000 ISO and come up with a beautiful photo. I can't. I have no chance at that. The gear matters, right? If I had to shoot really low light situation and I had to go to 25,000 ISO, I have no photo on my A1. So the gear matters, but it's equally as easy to take a not so great photo with good gear, right? So it's just, to me, it becomes more important when we position ourselves, where we position ourselves and why. And that is what really helps to not just get a photo, but a really good photo. But of course, the gear matters: smaller, faster, lighter, more accurate autofocus. I can't think of a single situation where that's not good, right? Yeah.
We'll keep it with gear here. We had a question regarding flash. Obviously, this is for the close range shots. I don't know anybody that's using flash with a 600 millimeter lens, but
You can
for
use
the
the
close
78,
range
but
shots,
that won't work. Yeah.
is it? I mean, does it work? Are you opposed to it? I know there might be ethical things. Or Dan threw in that obviously nighttime it can blind the owls at night, but for certain species, is this something that is a taboo? Does it work?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly taboo for certain people. I don't have a problem with it. I could say I haven't actually used flash in years since I got an A1 mirrorless camera. I don't need it. You know, they're so light and they can shoot so many frames a second, even if you're shooting a really slow shutter speed, one of them sharp. You know, if you're shooting 1/80th of a second, 1/60th of a second, you have 2 or 3 seconds, one or two of the photos are sharp. You know, they don't all have to be sharp, just one of them has to be sharp. So I don't use flash ever. I own a flash that I've never taken out of the box from my Sony camera. I used to use it every now and then in certain situations, but I don't use it anymore. I would say I've never had I had a lot more birds fly away because I heard the sound of my old Nikon D850. They heard the, you know, the smack of the shutter than a flash. I don't think I ever had a bird fly away when I used a flash or seen blinded or anything, but I certainly had them fly away from the shutter. So I don't use it. I have no problem with it, but I haven't used it in years.
Okay. Let's stay right there. You mentioned shot selection. You know, you only need one shot.
Right.
It jumped out to me, you know, there was one image where you had the wing was forward and you mentioned the posture of that wing. And for somebody who's not a bird photographer, are there certain positions or certain shots or, you know, is it like, you know, as opposed to, okay, a bird eating something. Obviously, everybody wants that cool shot of a big, you know, predatorial bird with prey in its
Mhm.
claws or in its mouth. But is there certain shots for like people who might want to be submitting to contests or who really want the it shot? You know, we're going for the moment. Is there certain wing positions or anything like that that people should be paying attention to?
So I don't enter contests, so I'd have a hard time commenting on that. I don't have a problem with contests. I just don't ever get around to it. So I wouldn't feel, you know, comfortable on that. I certainly haven't won one, so I couldn't tell you um, about that. But there are positions that I like, right? If something is, if their wings are sort of flat and you're shooting from the side, they're going to be covering the bird, right? So if the wings would be all the way up or all the way down, then you're getting a beautiful view of the wing and the bird as well, right? I prefer, to me, that wings forward that I talked about, or a complete, you know, banking type pose, just sort of show a bit more action, flight, movement to me. But that's a personal preference. I don't think that there's one that, it's whatever you want, right? It's whatever kind of art people want to portray. It's whatever they like. I don't usually show, big hawks and stuff in these talks. Ospreys catching fish, those sort of things. I have nothing wrong with those shots, but I don't normally show them. There are so many of them out there. I try to concentrate on more difficult kind of shots to get, smaller songbirds in flight, things like that. So I prefer that sort of wings forward, wings up once in a while, or those banking poses. To me, they just portray more movement and action, but that's a personal preference.
Okay. Well, sneak one last question in here from Harry. Thanks for hanging in there. How many of your shots are handheld versus on a tripod or using any other stabilizer techniques?
That's a great question, and it's difficult to answer. I would say 100% of the flight shots are handheld. I don't, especially if you have to move something small and fast, there's no way I could move enough or have enough range using a tripod. Things on the water, things on the ground, shorebirds, ducks, things like that, I'm typically using a ground pod, right? I've got the camera on a ground pod. I've done my best to get the camera as low as possible. I talk about that a lot in that first talk that I talked about with the shooting angle. So I use a ground pod for that. Something like that warbler, the yellow-throated warbler and the flowers, I use a tripod. So it depends on the stuff. If you're going to be waiting 2 hours and you want the bird, you're at eye level with the bird, and you can set up the tripod, and I can't hold the lens for 2 hours. I'm not that big or that strong, where I can hold that lens for that long. But certainly I use a combination of the three. Flight would be 100% of them are handheld, depending on how close the bird is. Sometimes with the 600, sometimes, I showed a cliff swallow in flight. I used a 70 to 200. The bird was maybe 8 feet away from me, moving at full speed. Couldn't even focus on it with the 600 at that point, nor, could I wield the 600 in that case. So ground pod for everything on the water or on the ground, shorebird type situations. The common tern that I showed with its wings up and the two little babies, ground pod. Anything like that, I use my ground pod. Anything that's just sort of waiting a long time, a warbler or something like that, I showed an orchard oriole, that I use a tripod.
Okay. I'm going to sneak one last question in because it just popped into my head. I was thinking animal photos, and it's like, it's not the same as going to the zoo as if you're going out on an African safari. With birds, bird feeder photos, is part of the fun just going out and finding? I know a lot of birders, I live right by Inwood Hill Park here up by northern Manhattan, and it's like there's people. It's the fun is in going around with a pair of binoculars and spotting the birds.
Right.
And I think a bird feeder, it's almost fish in a barrel. Is there something to be said for images, using a bird feeder to get images of birds? Or
I don't have a problem with it. I'm happy to get a cheap bird every now and then. Bird photography is really hard. I say that all the time. If people come on one of my tours or whatever, I'm very honest about pointing out, it's super difficult to get a really great photo of anything. These birds are easier because you can just kind of walk up to them, or you can do whatever. So I have absolutely no problem with the few times you get a chance to photograph something coming to food or water, or a feeder or something like that, where you get a sort of a freebie every now and then. That's very, I'll take it, because most of them are really far from freebies, right? They're crawling through mud and they're driving 50 miles and they're hoping you get a moment of opportunity. So every once in a while, when you can just stand still and have something fly towards you, I'll take it. In fact, I showed a female cardinal flying by. She was flying to a feeder. I knew where she was going. It was easy to track her, right? She was going off of a bush and flying to a feeder. And of course, she could have flown away, but she didn't. She flew right towards the feeder. And she looked at me as she was going by. Hey, who's that? And so I'll take it. For certain birds that are so small and fast and erratic, there's almost, lucking into a cardinal flying past you at close range out in the field, perfectly parallel to the cameras. Not that it can't be done, but it's extremely difficult. You got to just be super fortunate. There are times when you can sort of get a few more of those odds in your favor, and then try to work on producing a really cool photo, like a bird that's normally difficult to approach or difficult to track in flight. But when you sort of know where it's coming from or going to, you can do that. There are places in Texas that, they charge you a lot of money to go there to get those kind of shots, because You know where they're coming from and going to. They're coming to food or water, and there's a sort of a known flight path. So I don't have any problem with it. I'm happy to get her a freebie now and then, but it's still really difficult to, in that case, track a cardinal. They're super fast. You don't know when they're taking off. You don't know where they're going, or anything like that. So I have no problem with it. I have no problem with anything, to be honest with you. I mean, I think this is such a difficult, profession or pastime or hobby that the more we can do to push the odds in our favor, to tip that scale in our favor, like a freebie once in a while, I'll take it.
I love that. Isaac, your work is as inspirational as it is aspirational. Every time I take a bird photo, I made the mistake of showing my son your images. So now every time I take a picture of a bird, it doesn't measure up. So I'm aspiring. I'm
Well, thank you.
aspiring. I figure a couple more workshops and maybe I'll get kind of there.
All right, sounds good.
Awesome. Well, it's always
Yeah.
great to have you on, Isaac. I know our viewers feel the same way. If you guys don't have or don't have a question now or think of something later, Isaac did drop his information. Definitely go throw him a follow on Instagram and support our speakers here. Want to send a huge thank you to Isaac and of course all of our viewers out there. That is it. It's all we got for you today. Another round of the B&H virtual event space in the books. Catch you on next time.
Thank you.